Hi there, welcome to the Prado Museum. We're here in room 43 for our weekly sessions in English. Thank you so much to our donors for making sessions like this possible. Please take a minute to check us out. We are the American Friends of the Prado Museum, as well as our sister organization, Fundación Amigos del Museo del Prado. I'm excited to be talking about this work behind us today by the Italian master Titian or Tiziano. We're going to be looking at this tense moral work around the story of Salome. And this was painted toward the end of Titian's life in the mid 16th century. And he's treating this theme of Salome, which comes from the Old Testament, a story which is filled with power and influence and beauty and seduction, a really interesting theme to explore. So a second about Titian. Titian is one of our Italian masters, born in the end of the 15th century, painting in the beginning of the 16th, centered mostly in Venice. And there, the style and the mood was really centered around how to capture psychology and emotion through color and light. And we see this exemplified beautifully in this painting. We have these jewel tones in her dress, the intensity of the glow of her skin, and it really, Titian is one of the masters that influenced many painters afterwards in this Venetian style. So instead of focusing on line as defining the form, defining the action, color and light is the focus. And as a nice comparison, right next door, we have a work by Veronese, where you can see the influence of Titian in this work, right? Again, focusing in on these jewel tone colors, the emotional state of the sitter, in this case it's Mary Magdalene, the glowing textures of her skin, and again, this is the influence of Titian on these other Italian painters in the 16th century. So focusing in a little bit on the story of Salome, it's an intense one. So we're set, and one of the main characters in this story is Herod. He was the king of Galilee, and he decided to take his brother's wife as his bride. Her name is Herodias. This was denounced by John the Baptist. John the Baptist said this could not happen. He talked about it publicly and embarrassed Herodias, the new wife. Now, during Herod's birthday celebration with lots of celebratory elements, he requested that his stepdaughter, Salome, would dance for the group. And he liked the dance so much that he offered her to anything that she wanted, up to half of his kingdom. Now, Salome goes to her mother to ask for her opinion. What should I ask for? And her mother tells her, you should ask for the head of John the Baptist. So Salome follows the order. She goes to Herod and requests, I want the head of John the Baptist on the silver platter. And even though Herod had a lot of respect for John the Baptist, his pride would not let him not fulfill the promise. And so John the Baptist was executed in prison, and the head of John the Baptist was delivered to Salome. That brings us to this scene, right? And it's interesting because the story of Salome has been treated by many different painters throughout history. And earlier than this one of Titian, the focus is really about her as the seductress. But Titian is telling us a different story here. First, we talked a little bit about his use of light and color. So we can look at their treatment of her pale, almost transparent skin, her eyes looking downward, and she doesn't show us a look of remorse. Her lips are slightly parted. She's looking down to the sort of lower right hand of us, and she is firm in her stance. Now we can compare the way that the light pours over her body, how luminous she is, in comparison to this decapitated head on a platter up in the right-hand corner. It is dark. We see tiny bits of detail. He suggests to us what is there. And this comparison between beauty and the grotesque creates this tension as you look at this work. We look at her beautiful face, defiant and confident in her action, while she holds, without wavering, this platter with a head on it. And that's a pretty jarring comparison. I also want to talk a little bit about all of the different themes that are happening in here. So we've talked a little bit about this beauty as confronted with brutality, but also Titian has given her an identity which goes far beyond just a female beauty, which is sort of seducing the interests of another. She has an entire interior world, and what Titian is asking us in this painting is to question her choice in that moment, as she literally holds the weight of her decision in her hands, and a dark one at that. This kind of tension that he creates is exemplified not just in the composition, but in this comparison in color. And it's absolutely stunning, while making us as the viewer feel this tension of the moment of, what am I looking at? What has happened here? And what is she going to do next? So as we look at this and consider what Titian was doing, why he was doing it, we can ask ourselves, or rather Titian asking Salome, what do you do now as you hold the literal weight of your choice? And we can question what we think she would answer, looking at that look on her face, that she's willing to hold it. Thank you so much for joining me in exploring this work. We'll see you next week for our weekly sessions in English.